Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Overtime. We're in 2 Kings chapters 11 and 12. Our big idea was true faith is found in God first. Crumbling faith is based on social and circumstance. So a crumbling faith, if it's based on social, means you're into your faith as long as your friends are into it, as long as it's popular. Or your crumbling faith is based on circumstance. So as long as things are going the way that I want, or as long as God is answering the prayers in the way that I want him to answer them, then I'll have faith. But true faith is found in God first. Lord, regardless of what's going on in my life, regardless of whether the sermon is great and the music is great and my friends are there, God, I'm here for you. I want to learn about you. I want to get into your word. I want to grow in my faith. So hopefully we're all developing true faith instead of crumbling faith. We learned that Joash had more of a crumbling faith than a true faith. I've got several points that really jumped out to me that I wanted to just discuss with you guys and throw out there. They didn't make it into the sermon, but I thought they were really fun and useful points. The first point is simply this. We all have a role to play in God's kingdom. And there are two characters, particularly in 2 Kings 11 and 12, that no one really knows about, but they played a huge role in unifying the kingdom and of Judah. So you've got Jehoshaphat, who saved Joash when Athaliah was going crazy and wanting to kill everyone. She hid Joash as a young baby until he was the age 7 in the temple. And she simply protected his life and preserved his life and helped create a kingdom that would honor God. And then you have Jehoiada, who was the priest at the time, and he really took a solid leadership role in helping Judah put their eyes on God and get rid of all the idols. You don't hear much about Jehoshaphat and Jehoiada anymore, but they were both heroes of the time. And it just causes me to think of some of the heroes that I've had in my life that have made a huge difference in my life. And I think of my parents, I think of my siblings, I think of some of my past teachers and coaches and just people that I've pastored alongside that have made a huge difference in my life. And because of the difference that they made in my life, now I can make a difference in the lives of others. And I bet that you've got several people like that as well. They're not famous, they're not hugely popular, but just simply by being faithful to God, they made a big difference. That should really be our goal. We should have the goal of Jehoiada and Jehoshaphat to say, God, I just want to be on Team Jesus and I want to help move the kingdom along. Whether people notice me or not, I want to honor you in that way. So that was the first thing that jumped out, that we all have a role to play in God's kingdom. The second thing that jumped out to me is how Jehoiada was so courageous to eliminate temptation, which is different than what Joash did. But I'm going to read from 2 Kings 11, 17 through 21 to illustrate that. Verse 17 says, "And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, and also between the king and the people. Then all the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore it down, his altars and his images they broke in pieces, and they killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest posted watchmen over the house of the Lord. And he took the captains, the Kerites, the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king down from the house of the Lord, marching through the gate of the guards to the king's house. And he took his seat on the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet after Athaliah had been put to death with the sword at the king's house. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign." So Joash is very young. So Jehoiada is really taking a huge leadership role here in helping lead Judah and the people. So a few things are established here by Jehoiada as Joash is young. Well, first off, they should be the Lord's people. Second off, the people are going to stand by their young king, Joash. Thirdly, they tore down the house of Baal, and then they destroyed all the materials associated with Baal, and then they killed the priest of Baal. So they are seeking to eliminate all the distractions. Now, we can remember in the book of Deuteronomy and in the book of Joshua how the call was so incredibly clear on the Israelites. We've got to get rid of all the idol worship and all the people that are worshiping idols because they are going to distract us. I think it's incredibly important for you and I in 2026 to realize that there are a lot of times where we've got to do whatever it takes to eliminate distractions. And Jesus had something to say about eliminating distractions as well in Matthew 5:29 and 30. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell. Now, Jesus is basically saying, if you've got something that's distracting you in your life, you may be especially weak to some area of temptation. The best thing you can do is stop trusting yourself to be so incredibly strong around that temptation and just get rid of that thing that tempts you. Temptations that we allow to linger around us are going to eventually become our downfall. We would like to think that our sin is this small domestic goldfish when our sin and temptation is actually more of a great white shark that is always hungry to consume, looking for its next meal. And the more we feed it, the hungrier it gets. Jehoiada the priest knew this, and this is why he went on the campaign to say, we're getting rid of all of the Baal stuff. So that's the second thing that jumped out to me I thought was so profound. The third thing I really think is actually funny. This is where Joash is trying to repair the temple. Athaliah had led the people in destroying the temple and doing a ton of damage. And Joash, as the king, as he gets older, he tells the Levites, hey, we need to do a fundraiser and we need to make sure that the temple gets put back into peak shape. And so the thing that makes me laugh is the very first campaign that Joash leads the Levites on, the Levites are not totally bought into it, partially because they're comfortable. And I know we talked a little bit about that this morning during the message. But the other thing is the Levites didn't want to be that guy. I think part of it was they didn't want to go out and ask for money. It's really hard to ask people for money. I mean, from my standpoint as a pastor, you never hear, hey, oh, pastor, I love that point in your sermon where you asked for money. I've never gotten that before. As a matter of fact, anytime we ever talk about money, it's always like, oh, could you just not talk about money? And the Levites must feel that tension as well. They were comfortable where they were, and they just didn't want to go out and fundraise because fundraising is hard work. And we know that Joash eventually changed the strategy to just put a big treasure box out front, and it ended up getting done. But the Levites didn't want to ask the people for money to go toward the work of God. Now, here's something that I've learned, though, and I want you to kind of see behind the curtain for me as a pastor. This is going to sound crazy, especially if you hate talking about money at church, but I want to share this with you. One of the healthiest things that I can do and that we can do at church is talk about how we're spending our money. It's one of the healthiest things because you think about how much money plays a role in every single part of our lives. And so talking about it is important. Talking about using our money to support the work of God is also incredibly important. So I'm just like the Levites, like I don't want to talk about money and I don't want to ask people for money. And I just really related to them on that part of the story. But it is seriously one of the healthiest things we can do because we all need to be encouraged on how are we investing our time, our talents, and our treasures. The next thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is about phony faith and cancel culture. We know that Jehoiada led Judah to eliminate temptation, but Joash, he was softer on the temptation. He allowed temptation to be around with some of the government officials. and he allowed the high places. So this is how this goes down with Joash, but honestly with any of us. At first, temptation is allowed to be around. Then temptation is welcomed into the room. Oh, I'm not going to participate in it, but I'm okay having it in the room with me. But then it's participated in, and then it is celebrated. And then anyone that won't celebrate that temptation and that sin with you is the enemy. And this happens all the time with sin and temptation. It happens all the time in our culture. I bet you've seen this in your life, and people sometimes seem so confident in their faith, but they begin to deconstruct their faith because they begin to say yes to small temptations that become large temptations. And before you know it, you're celebrating, participating in something that feels so good to you, but it was never meant in God's eyes to happen. Culture clearly got to Joash, and he turned. He turned so quickly that even after Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, one of the biggest influences in Joash's life, Zechariah confronts him. He's not impacted by it. But instead of just listening to Zechariah and turning Zechariah away and saying, hey man, like, I love you, loved your dad, just go do your thing, talk about God somewhere else. No, instead, Joash led the people to have Zechariah stoned to death. And this, to me, is what cancel culture is. It's like, hey, if you don't agree with this part as far as morally what I'm doing with my life and you speak out against it, we're going to cancel you. Now, 2026, it's more like we're going to cancel you. You're not going to get the same jobs. You're not going to be famous anymore. You're not going to make as much money. But back then, cancel culture looked like, all right, let's take the guy out back and let's stone him. But phony faith and cancel culture exists today, but it existed back then as well. And then as Joash continues to get weaker in his faith, his nation around him begins to crumble, but the people around him also, their trust in him begins to crumble. 2 Kings 12:17 and 18, it says, at that time, Hazael, king of Syria, went up and fought against Gath and took it. But when Hazael set his face to go up against Jerusalem, Joash, king of Judah, took all the sacred gifts that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah, his fathers, the kings of Judah, had dedicated, and his own sacred gifts, and all that the gold that was found in the treasures of the house of the Lord and of the king's house, and sent these to Hazael, king of Syria. Then Hazael went away from Jerusalem. So what's going on here is that Joash had been injured, but he was also incredibly weak. Remember, he had given into temptation, and now he just has to do anything he can to survive against Syria and Hazael. Now remember, God rose Hazael up years before this as a curse against Israel and Judah because they had turned their back on him. And so now you see Joash basically saying, take all of our treasures, all of our sacred resources, Hazael, whatever you need. And he bribes Hazael, and Hazael takes all the riches. And now the people have lost confidence in Joash. So how does this thing go down? 2 Kings 12:21. His own servants, it says, arose and made a conspiracy and struck down Joash in the house of Millo on the way that goes down to Silla. It was Josachar the son of Shimeath and Jehozabad the son of Shomer, his servants, who struck him down so that he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah his son reigned in his place. We read a slightly different account from 2 Chronicles, but I wanted to read this perspective as well from 2 Kings. So what's happening here is exactly what Zechariah said would happen. We've got to remember what we learned today. If you forsake God, he will forsake you. And Joash had forsaken God, and because of that, his leadership got weak. He got injured. He had to surrender to Hazael. But then his own servants saw how weak he was in leadership, and they conspired against him and had him killed. All of these points add up to one final point, and it's simply this. It is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for me. It's a wake-up call for you. Do I have a crumbling faith that's based on social and circumstance, or do I have a true faith that is based on God? Is my faith really my own? This is a question that I've had to face more than once in my life. I think the first time I really realized I had to have a faith for myself, I was a sophomore in college, and I was trying to share the gospel with the guy that was cutting my hair. He was a barber, and this guy was really kind of a hippie type of guy, and he had a question for every single answer that I had about the faith, and just wanted to point out how hypocritical Christians were. And it really caused an internal crisis for me. I'm like, do I really believe all the stuff that my mom and dad taught me to believe, my pastors growing up taught me to believe, my professors in college were teaching me to believe? Do I really believe it? And I began to personally pray and seek God on my own. And my faith came down to one thing. It came down to Jesus. Jesus is historically proven, and Jesus chose to die. We know that historically, and he rose again, and no one can disprove the resurrection. But not only that, but as I was personally looking this up, I realized all of Jesus's closest personal friends, they gave their life, after Jesus left the earth, they gave their life to share the gospel, and they suffered and they died as a result. What would motivate someone to do that? What would motivate people to be martyred? But not in a war type way, like in Islam, but in a way of just exchanging ideas that they would be martyred. Because Satan fears the ideas of Jesus. And then you think about things like, how did Christianity survive the Roman Empire and Babylon and all of these empires and dynasties? And how is it that the Bible is the most historically reliable set of manuscripts in the history of all of mankind? And how do all the stories match up? And how is it that the Church of Jesus Christ is the most powerful and impactful force locally and in the entire world, even though much of the world is pinned against it and the media tries to speak against it all the time? And then lastly, how do I feel such a personal peace when I'm connected to God? So this really led me to the conclusion of making my faith my own. There is an empty tomb. There is a risen Savior. There is a living church that has withstood all of these dynasties and persecution. And now it is the most powerful force in the world, thanks to Jesus sending down the Holy Spirit. So for me, God woke me up and he really stirred me up toward ministry, which really led me to some of my life verses that are found in Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. And it says this: therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin that clings to us so closely, and let us run the race that is marked out for us. And let us keep our eyes on Jesus, who is the author and the perfecter of our faith, for who the joy set before him endured the cross, despising its shame, and is seated at the right hand of God. For me, it comes down to Jesus and how it is always going to be about putting my eyes on him. I hope that today's message is a wake-up call for all of us, because true faith is found in God first. Obviously, that's through Jesus Christ. The crumbling faith is found through social and through circumstance. Thanks for joining us today for the Overtime. We will do this again next week.